You are not alone in making mistakes, and you are certainly not alone in feeling like those mistakes are trying to suck you down a negative mindset vortex. The great news is that you are in charge of the narrative inside your own head. You get to make that negative spiral down into a positive upwards pull through your actions.
Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. If you only take one sheet of paper to your next negotiation, let it be the PA Pay One Sheet. It's a tool designed to walk you through setting up the ideal outcomes, assessing the situation you are negotiating in, and it even includes a reminder of which negotiation skills you can use. Stop what you are doing. Download the one sheet, print it out, fill it out, and literally bring it to the table with you when you are negotiating next. It's designed specifically to work in healthcare settings wherever you are. You can use the PA One Sheet to get the best deal, the biggest raise, and to help your confidence walking into your next negotiation. Head to www.tracybingaman.com/one, that's ONE, to download your free copy of the PA Pay One Sheet and start prepping for your next negotiation today. It's linked in the show notes, but in case you missed it, it's at www.tracybingaman.com/ONE.
Welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. Today, we're going to talk about mistakes and negative mindset spirals, specifically how to break out of that downward spiral and get some positivity back, and what to do to sort of triage that mistake and get out of that negative mindset and into a positive one. So here's the thing. Mistakes happen. Things go wrong. There are sometimes small and sometimes larger consequences to those things happening. We all make mistakes because we are all human beings. Now, being a human being who works in healthcare means that sometimes those mistakes can come with heavy consequences. This episode is all about what to do when you make a mistake and when that mistake tries to suck you down into a negative mindset spiral. When things go wrong, whether it's something that is expressly your fault or something inevitable that happened due to outside forces, we can get sucked down into a vortex of this negative mindset spiral. In this situation, we can feel like we're beating ourselves up over the situation, the outcome, and berating ourselves for what we could have done differently. I recently had this happen. So I made a mistake at work. Now, I know that's going to shock you because I am here saying I'm the expert and this is the thing. I am a human being just like you. So I made a mistake at work. I forgot to do something. And when it was brought to my attention after the fact of me having made this mistake, I was, as expected, a bit defensive. But I was also upset with myself that this had happened. More specifically, that I had let it happen or that I had not done the task that needed to be done. It was just a day at work where things felt out of whack. Our staffing wasn't normal, someone was off, we didn't have staff to shift into that position, and I was juggling multiple demands. And if I'm being completely honest, my head wasn't 100% in the game. I was a little distracted. I felt a little discombobulated because of the situation, and I missed a step, and quite plainly, I forgot to do something. The outcome wasn't catastrophic from a patient standpoint, but it was something that cost our practice money. So I made this omission or kind of didn't do something that needed to be done. And then someone brought it to my attention. They said, hey, this happened, this wasn't done, and as a result, we experience this loss as a practice. So, having walked through this experience, I realized that as I grappled with what to do differently next time and how to navigate those feelings of defensiveness and anger and sadness, and how to bootstrap my way out of that negative mindset and into a situation where I was feeling positive, where I was feeling proactive, where I was feeling in control of what I could do differently next time, I thought it would be something important for us to cover here on the podcast. So today I'm sharing 3 steps that you can take to get out of that negative mindset spiral, or even just 3 things to try. So you might not necessarily have to do all 3 of these in every situation, but the goal here is to try to break out of that negative mindset spiral, get out of your own head relative to the negativity that can come along with a mistake that happens clinically, or even just a mistake that happens in life. So this is applicable in retroactive situations, like the mistake that I made. So I made a mistake. It was brought to my attention after the fact. But this approach could also be used when we get into a negative mental spiral, a negative situation, or dread, like forward thinking, where we're thinking negatively about an upcoming encounter or situation. You can use some of these strategies to break that negativity inside your own head. These tactics are some of the things that I attempted personally following that mistake that I made. So I thought it might be helpful in case you ever ended up in a similar situation yourself. So, first up, feel the feelings. Have you ever heard that phrase, to name it is to claim it, in reference to certain feelings? So, the first thing that I did when this mistake happened is to feel the feelings. Immediately after this mistake was brought to my attention, I was angry. I was angry at myself. Mainly, I was also mad and sad. I was disappointed. I was maybe a little bit ashamed. I was absolutely a little defensive, which, if you've listened to this or my other episodes on negative feedback in the past, you will know that that defensiveness is my knee jerk reaction to being told that I'm not doing anything well. But all of those feelings were sort of swirling as this was brought to my attention, as this was being addressed sort of internally with me. The first thing I did, so before trying to launch into like a more cerebral or analytical approach to break this negative spiral in my mind, was to feel the feelings. It is okay to be upset, to be distraught, to be angry. It's literally okay to feel any of the feelings that you may be happening surrounding any situation. My first inclination was to be defensive directly towards the person who pointed out my mistake. Now, it was not this person's fault that I had missed a step or missed this thing, but I felt a little bit angry with them. I felt defensive of my own abilities, and that when I get defensive, I sometimes infer like, oh, they think I'm totally incompetent and I can't do anything, and that this was a reflection of that, when really they were just communicating, hey, we realized this happened last week. I'm addressing it with you. So I felt angry with myself for overlooking the situation, for missing the step. I was sad that this mistake cost the practice money. I feel like I'm very aware of the fact that we are a private practice with a budget and that we have a bottom line, and that this mistake cost us money. I was a little disappointed in my previous self that I didn't have a system in place to prevent this specific thing from happening. I do feel like I try to be proactive, but as proactive as we are, as good as we are about implementing systems, we can't always foresee every potential situation that might crop up. So, despite my best efforts to have systems and processes and checks and balances in place, this thing still happened. So, when it comes to feeling the feelings and working in medicine, we have, in medicine in general, been trained to check our feelings at the door. It's the way that we survive seeing patients that are hurt and sick and dying and in pain before us without collapsing and internalizing their discomfort and their pain and their situation on every single encounter in which we see a patient. So, given this training, whether it's overt or a subtle learned behavior, that we are trained to set our feelings aside, to bury them, to compartmentalize them. This first step of feeling the feelings for healthcare workers may feel very uncomfortable. It might be awkward at first and it might make us feel really vulnerable, but I want you to commit to trying it anyway. So, thinking about those feelings, addressing what's actually happening, what you're actually feeling, and why is a great way to sort of diffuse the emotions that come along with the situation. So, taking time to evaluate how you're feeling and naming the exact specific feeling that you're feeling is not a waste of time. It's not a soft skill. It's not something that you can just skip over to get to the diagnosis and treatment, so to speak. So you can't skip it because identifying those feelings is a part of being human, and that matters. Those feelings have a purpose, whether it's to keep us safe or to keep our patients safe or to help us to understand the weight of our own actions or simply to remind us that we are humans. Take the time to write down, say out loud, or simply acknowledge in your own mind the feelings that you are having as a result of the situation that you are navigating. It may be shame or guilt. You may feel regret or sadness or anger. You may feel gaslighted by the situation. All feelings are valid. And there's something to be said for addressing them so that you can move through the feelings so you don't get stuck inside that emotional reaction so that you can get to the more analytical part of this situation. It behooves us at this point to recognize, as we're talking about feelings, that we often talk about thoughts and feelings simultaneously. So, not all of our thoughts are true. In these situations, I often find myself personally focusing only on the negatives. So let's say you're in a situation and you placed an incorrect order, or you missed an important diagnosis, or you simply, like me, forgot to do something. Inside your mind, the narrative might sound something like this. Oh my God, Tracy, you are such a terrible provider. You're untrustworthy. Your memory is complete crap. You're not safe. Your patients are not safe in your care. If I were a coworker or one of your supervising physicians, I wouldn't trust you as far as I can throw you. You are an embarrassment as a PA. Seriously. Your patients are all in danger of you making this same mistake again. You always do this. Think of all of the mistakes that you have made as a part of your career as a PA, and so on. Now, I want to take a minute to really dissect sort of what I was saying as a part of that negative mindset spiral and some of the things that can be going on inside of your own head as a part of this. So the tone and the tempo of what I was saying, where it's sort of this like scathing negative voice that's happening inside of your own mind. So in these situations, your brain doesn't tend to kindly remind you of the 47 things that you didn't forget on the day that you made that mistake. Our mind doesn't focus on all the PEs that you did appropriately catch, treat, and disposition that day. Essentially, we find what we are looking for. And when we get in this negative mindset space, what we are looking for is evidence that we are terrible. We forget the great things that we have done, the lives that we have saved, the positive patient interactions, the appropriate diagnoses that we have made when we get in this space where we are just railing on ourselves mentally. We tend to see the negative experiences, right? We tend to focus on other mistakes, things that we've done wrong in the past, because that is what is front of mind during these situations. So take time to remind yourself as you navigate the feelings in the fallout of a mistake or a bad situation that you do great things each day. Check in with yourself if that negative track and that negative sort of scathing mindset is running inside your mind. So that's the thoughts and the feelings step. We're going to move on to some objective analysis of the situation.
One of my very favorite things about being a podcaster is crossing paths with other incredible podcasters. If you love this show, especially when I share about my experience with healthcare burnout and recovery, you're going to want to check out the podcast Burnout: What I've Learned So Far, hosted by my friend Meg Letty. Meg is a former CT surgery PA turned advocate for healthcare provider wellness. Turn in to hear how she recovered from burnout and integrated well-being into her life to create a life of dreams, not nightmares. Add Burnout, What I Have Learned So Far with Meg Letty to your podcast queue to start your journey to wellness and healing today.
So step 2, perform an objective analysis. The next step is hauling your ass out of that negative mindset spiral in order to perform your own objective analysis of the situations. So sometimes you need a little time and space from your thoughts and feelings, or to work through the thoughts and feelings that you're having about the situation. See step 1 before you can complete step 2. It's hard to perform an objective analysis of a situation if you are still super stressed out, if you are still sad and angry and upset and navigating the feelings that come along with that situation. When we talk about performing an objective analysis, this is looking at what happened objectively to the best of your ability, setting your own thoughts, negative or positive, your own feelings, negative or positive, aside, and identifying as a part of this situation what went wrong, specifically what you did wrong. Ouch, right? So this is like a little bit hard. So what did you do wrong? What could you do differently in this situation or in a similar situation in the future? What systems or processes were missing or skipped or overlooked or sped past that contributed to this specific outcome? So for my mistake specifically, as I said earlier, there was someone who was out that day. So typically that person performed this task. And because they were out, it fell to me to take care of it because no one else was covering for them. So the problem was that I didn't have a system to remind myself to do that thing. I went about my typical day and I overlooked that this task was my responsibility. At the end of the day, I thought I had completed all the necessary tasks, right? My notes were done, my patients had been seen. I packed up my stuff and I hit the road forgetting to do it. So when I think of that situation and perform an objective analysis, I'm going to ask myself, what could I do differently next time in a similar situation? Well, I could make it a habit to check and make sure that this thing was being done every day before I left the office, regardless of whether it was my responsibility that day or not. I could, when this person is out, put a post-it note on my computer or a reminder on my phone to check and make sure that that task was done on days when this person was not in the office and not taking care of this task. I could write a little check item on my to-do list to make sure that this task is done before leaving the office. I tend to have a to-do list at the bottom of my printout of patients for the day, where if like ancillary tasks come out throughout the day, I'll put them on the list because sometimes I'm in the middle of seeing someone or I can't take care of the task at that point. And I try to clear the to-do list at the end of the day. So that would serve as a reminder to me to do it before I left. So ultimately, all three of these possible improvements for next time make it my responsibility to check that it's done. And they serve as a reminder or a prompt or a fail-safe to ensure that the task is completed. Because I am sort of like, hey, the first time was my mistake and it hadn't happened in the past. And this, I'm not going to let it happen again. So if you're saying, I'm not going to let it happen again, you have to say, how am I not going to let it happen again? Because sheer force of will is not always an answer to making sure that you don't miss something or make a similar mistake in the future. So sometimes the analysis puts more weight on focus or focus on what you specifically did wrong or what you didn't do that generated the mistake. But sometimes the analysis will highlight the systems that need to be tweaked in order to make changes down the line. So the bottom line here is that the analysis should lead to taking action. If this is something preventable that wasn't prevented, how can we change that in the future and then do that thing? Also, I want you to be open to the idea that it was a fluke, that it wasn't, in fact, your fault. It could be the perfect storm of a situation where the stars align in a bad way. There are mistakes that are solidly on your shoulders, and there's also a time to realize that there are many factors beyond our control. If this is just that, the stars aligning or a series of unfortunate events, let the results of your analysis reflect that. And then the action that we take is working to let it go and not hold yourself responsible or accountable for things that you cannot control. Third, debrief with a trusted coworker. It can feel really hard to be objective about a situation where you are intimately involved. It's the whole can't see the forest for the trees analogy. I feel like we've had like a lot of analogies or phrases that I'm using as a part of this episode, but it is what it is. So, step three, or the third thing that you can try as you're navigating a negative mindset spiral or sort of coping with a mistake, is to debrief with a trusted coworker. In the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom, and seeking counsel about this situation is a great way to take this analysis and processing of a situation one step further. Take some time to explain to this person what happened, and when you're choosing who to confide in, choose someone who gets it. So that's most likely someone who works in medicine or has a good idea about what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Ideally, this is someone whose opinion you trust and who will also extend you the grace that you deserve as you're navigating this mistake. Talking through the situation can give you an outside perspective and someone that can tell you, I've been there. I've made a similar mistake. I've done that. I've got the t-shirt. I've lived to tell the tale, and to give you some outside advice about either how they navigated it, or just because they're an outside perspective, they won't be as emotionally or intimately involved with the situation. And sometimes that change of perspective can be super helpful. They can help you to brainstorm ways of things that you can do differently in the future. And they can also help to say, hey, on my analysis, is this a fluke or is this a mistake, right? Is this something that was within your control, or is this something that happens as a part of the world that we live in, as a part of the healthcare system that we work within? These things happen and it wasn't your fault. Because sometimes we do our own analysis and then we think, this seems like it was a fluke, right? And if it were someone else, we would say it was a fluke. But because it's us, we hold ourselves to a different standard and we feel like we have to find out what we did wrong, how we contributed to this situation. Life and life working in medicine is not meant to be lived alone. Although it might feel vulnerable to open up to this person that you're confiding in about the mistake or the hard situation or the fact that you're having trouble with your mindset or navigating a mistake, opening up can be a powerful experience. It gives them the opportunity to speak into your life in a positive and encouraging way. And it also helps you to feel like you are not alone, and the fact that sometimes it's hard to work in healthcare, and sometimes the consequences of our actions or the system or things that happened are heavy, and that it's okay to be struggling as you navigate them. And it's okay to be in a place in your own mind where you're like, I don't really like the way that I'm speaking to myself or the way that I'm navigating this. And reaching out to someone else can help you sort of break that continual cycle and change the way that you're seeing the situation. The bottom line is that, as with all things, as with mistakes and hard situations and difficult conversations, we need to extend ourselves grace. If a coworker of mine had made the mistake that I made, I would not have been berating them. I would not have been railing on them in the way that I was inside of my own mind. There is no way that I would have taken the tone or used the cutting words that the negative voice inside my head was saying to myself to another person. Hopefully, I would be gracious to a coworker who had made a mistake. Even in pointing it out to them, I would hope that I was both kind and compassionate to that person. Don't you deserve to extend the same grace and compassion to yourself? You are a human after all, just like everyone else. That humanity makes you imperfect. And the goal here has never been perfection. The goal is mastering these situations and feeling slightly better prepared for the next time a similar situation arises. We can be as proactive as we want. We can have all the systems and checklists and to-do lists and safeguards in place, and we can still end up missing things. What matters most is cultivating a system to help deal with it. What matters most is building a skill set to help you to navigate mistakes with resilience, and for you to also cultivate this willingness to admit that you were wrong, but also to be kind to yourself in the process. You are not alone in making mistakes. And you are certainly not alone in feeling like those mistakes are trying to suck you down a negative mindset vortex. The great news is that you are in charge of the narrative inside your own head. You get to make that negative spiral down into a positive upwards pull through your actions. And sometimes that sounds like disrupting the things that you have been doing or thinking or saying about yourself as you're navigating the fallout of this mistake. I hope that you are in an environment where you have colleagues that are super helpful and supportive. But if you're not, look outside your own environment for some support as you're navigating struggles with your mindset or what it feels like to make a mistake and have it be a heavy thing, because we work in a place that's life and death, and that some mistakes are expensive, but some mistakes result in bad clinical outcomes and never events and preventable things that we would never want to happen to patients. It's part of navigating this life of working in healthcare, and it's also part of being a human who is in no way perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. If this was helpful to you, if you felt seen or heard, could you do me a favor and head to iTunes or wherever you tune in and subscribe and like and leave a 5-star review with some written feedback on what you loved about the show and what you got out of it. Consider sharing it with a friend or colleague who might need some help breaking out of a negative mindset spiral, or just send them the show and say, hey, there's some recent episodes that you might want to check out. It's the greatest way for you to say thank you to me for creating this content and this community of PAs who are headed towards a life where we feel supported and where we're extended grace, because making mistakes is part of being human, and being human is part of being a healthcare provider. That's all for this week. I will see you next time. Until then, this PA is out.
Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.